Now in this lecture, I want to talk about the concept of loops, things that have to happen over and over again. It's obvious that computers are often used to automate repetitive tasks. Repeating identical or similar tasks without making error is something that computers do well and people do poorly. Because iteration is so common, Python provides several language features to make it easier. Sometimes we want to loop through a set of things such as list of words, lines in a file, or list of numbers. When we have a list of things to loop through, we can construct a definite loop using for statement. This is the first type of loop I want to introduce you, which is called for loop, and it can be used really easily in a combination with a list, which we have learned in previous lesson. And this is the reason I have explained list in this section, even though it's type of data structure. By using for loop like this, we can go through each item in a list and perform some action with each individual item. So the general syntax of for loop is like this. First we are writing for keyword, then the item. This is the custom name that we are giving the list of items over here, then in keyword, then list of items. Then here in indented level, we can perform any repetitive action on items over here. Now let's see how this is working in practice. Now let's say we have a list of vegetables like this. So this is the name of list, which is vegetable. Then in the list, we have carrot, broccoli, and corn. And if we want to access each item in this list individually and print out them one by one, then we should use for loop. So to use for loop, first we start with for keyword. So I'm going to write for keyword. Then we give a name to a single item. So in this case, we have a list of vegetables. So for single item, I can give a name of vegetable. As I mentioned, this is a custom name that we are giving. So we can put anything that we want over here. So in this case, we call it vegetable. Then we use in keyword. So this is a general syntax. Then finally, we are going to give the name of the list that we want to loop through. So in this case, the name of list that we want to loop through is vegetables. So I'm just going to copy it from here and pass it over here. And then we cap it off with a colon. Then after putting colon, we hit enter and we go to the next line. So as you see, when we go to the next line, the cursor comes to the indented level over here. So whenever we put a colon and hit enter, the next line of code always become the indented level. So this means that whatever we are writing in this indented level is going to be inside this loop over here. Now inside this indentation level, I'm going to go ahead and print the value of each vegetable variables over here. Now to do so, I'm going to write print statement. Then inside print statement, I'm going to write vegetable. Now notice over here that we are not writing vegetables, name of list. We are writing the name that we have provided over here. Now after writing it, if I run our code, you will see that it's printing out the items inside list one by one. So first it's printing out carrot, which is the first item in the list. Then it's printing out broccoli, which is the second item in the list. Then it's printing out corn, which is the last item in the list. Now the important thing to realize here is that basically you can imagine that behind the scenes, what this code is going to do is it's taking this list of vegetables and it's assigning a variable name, which is vegetable, to each of these items. So the first time this runs vegetable is equal to carrot, then it's run vegetable is equal to broccoli, then it's run vegetable is equal to corn over here. Now to see how this is working, we can just copy this code from here and open the Tony editor and see how the steps are working over there. So if I just pass it over here inside the Tony editor and try to debug this by clicking the debug current script, you'll see that first it's going to establish the vegetable strings over here. Now if I click step into it, it will check all elements inside this vegetable list. So it establishes all elements inside the list, which are carrot, broccoli, and corn. Now then I'll continue to click step into it. You'll see that on the right over here, it's showing the variable name, which is vegetable, and the values over here. So the first variable name over here is vegetables, which holds the list of strings. Now if I continue to the loop, it's going to loop through the list of vegetables and it's going to assign the variable name vegetable to each of items over here. Now if I click step into it, you will see that first it's continuing to carrot. So as you can see, when it comes over here in the vegetable variable over here, we have carrot. Now then it's going to print out carrot to the console. So as you can see, the carrot printed out to the console. Now if I click one more time, it's going to continue to loop one more time because we have still elements in the vegetable list. So as you can see, in this case, it's going to assign broccoli to vegetable variable over here. Now, after doing so, it's going to print out one more time variable in which we have broccoli. So it's going to print out broccoli to the console, as you can see over here. Now, if I click one more time, you'll see that it's going to continue to do loop one more time. So it's going to repeat all these tasks until we have finished all elements inside the vegetable list. So as you can see, if I click one more time, variable value changed to corn, and it's going to print out corn to the console. Now, after printing out, you can see that all steps are completed because we have finished all elements inside vegetables list. So as I mentioned, it continues this until it prints all elements of this list to the console. Now, as I mentioned, the loop allows us to execute the same line of code multiple times. In this case, we are executing print statement 3 times. But our loop is not limited to just executing a single statement. We don't just have to print out name of the item from this list. We can execute a whole block of statements multiple times. Then we can do many things inside this loop over here at indentation level. So let's say that in addition to print out vegetable, I'm going to write another print statement, and I'm not going to print only the vegetable name. We can put something else over here to concatenate with the vegetable name. So let's say instead of printing out vegetable name, I'm just going to add some values over. Now let's put pie, for example, over here. Now in this case, if I run our code, what will happen? So let's run and see it. So you can see that first it's printing out vegetable, then it continues to print out vegetable with the pie. So as you can see here again, it is printing out all elements of the list with the second line of code. So this second line of code also is repeated 3 times. So first it's printing out carrot from here, then it's printing out carrot plus pie, then it continues to print out broccoli, then broccoli plus pie, and corn plus pie. Now this is how we can implement a simple loop that loops through a list and assigns a variable name to each of items in the list in order. And then inside for loop, after the colon in indentation level, we can do something with temporary variable for each of items over here. Now here, I've been talking a lot about the concept of being inside loop versus outside of the loop. And this is really, really important. So whenever you see a colon over here in if statements or in loop statements, the indentation level becomes really, really important. Because if it is intended, this means that this part of code over here will be executed inside the loop. So it might execute it until loop reaches the end of the list over here. Now, for example, over here, instead of printing vegetable, if I print out vegetables, what will happen? So if I put vegetables over here and run our code, you will see that this list of vegetables will be printed out 3 times to the console. Now, if I just comment this part, for example, this 2 line of code over here, and run our code, you will see that we have 3 elements in our vegetables, and this print vegetables will be printed out to the console 3 times because we have 3 elements in our vegetables list over here. And the reason that's printing out vegetables 3 times is that it is indented level over here. Now, instead of inside loop, if I put it outside of loop, so I'm just going to uncomment this part from here and run our code, you'll see that in this case, first is executing the loop statement, which is printing out carrot, broccoli, and corn to the console. Then it's continuing to this part of code over here, which is printing out the whole list itself. Now, hopefully with these examples over here, you start to see how loops are really handy at executing repetitive instructions over and over again and getting the computer to save us time and energy. Now here, if you have difficulties understand how these loop statements are working, I advise you to copy this code to the Tony and check it step by step by debugging it and check how the execution is performed. So this is all for this lecture. So in this lecture, we have learned the first type of loop, which is for loops, and for loops are really handy when we are dealing with the list or other data structures. So see you in the next lecture.